Welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe. Now introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Caines, and Ed Mann.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Three Devs and a Maybe, which should probably be renamed to Two Devs and Two Maybes, which hardly ever come on, but yeah. I am Michael Budd, and I'm joined today by the ever-present Ed Mann. How you doing?
Hello. Yeah, I'm always here.
You are always here.
I've got no life, and I'm always here. How are we doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Just kind of a bit burnt out with programming at the minute, but other than that, can't complain really. So
other than your job, you can't complain. I like it. I like it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'd rather not.
Well, hopefully we can talk about it. Hopefully we can talk about it this show and maybe hash some things out that you've been going on about.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. So, do you want to kick off? Because we've got quite a bit to get through, actually, looking at the notes.
Yeah, we actually do. I mean, for a change, we've got like a Google Doc, which is pretty full. So I think, let's. I suppose it's been a couple of weeks, though, since we last did one of these shows, not an interview show. So, yeah, I'm happy to start off if you're happy for me to.
You go for it.
Brilliant. Okay, yeah. So since I recorded the episode with Brian Moses, actually, I ended up building the server. So I now have my own beautiful server, which has been very fun. It was the first PC build server PC/server build that I've done in years. So it was quite fun and interesting, like playing around with the CPU and stuff. Amy, I was hoping to try and convince Amy into the fun and geeky side, and but no, she didn't quite take to it. She didn't really understand the concept of how delicate you have to be with a CPU and stuff. And she was wondering why I was so delicately putting this thing in and then putting the paste on and stuff. She's like, well, why don't you just put it? It's like, no. Okay. So it's not for her. We've learned that. We've learned that PC builds are not for Amy. But no, she is enjoying the fact that Plex is now on there and stuff. So the spec that I ended up going for, the nerd out, here we go. So I went for an Intel i5 76000K, the unlocked edition Kaby Lake processor. I went with that. I went for an i5 instead of an i7 because I just looked at the benchmarks and stuff and I realized I don't need too much. I need about 4. Ideally, I can get 4 1080 Plex streams going through it. And then maybe, and I've actually been testing it, I can get more than that actually in real hardware tests. And I need now with the HEVC format and stuff coming out, X265, I've been able to get I've been playing around with getting 4 streams of that rolling. So I've been really happy with that processor setup. I went with 16 gig of RAM, which actually, I may have to boost up. And then this is the fun part. So I ended up spending a lot more of my money because I kind of had a bit of money partitioned up and it's working out. This is what I love about server builds and stuff. It's kind of and even PC builds, it's kind of, you partition up, where you want to put money and where's the value in the setup, the story. And for me, the story was hard drive space. And I ended up going with 6 RAID 4 terabyte Western Digital drives. Red because that's the NAS build ones, which they run I think at 5,400 RPM, and they produce less heat and stuff. So they're made more for always on, and that was fun. And putting them in was interesting, and zip tying all of it together and stuff. I like to keep the server set up the actual build clean and stuff. So making sure everything's all tied and neatly put into the case is always a must. But yeah, so with that was the fact that I was aiming for was a ZFS-pool. So the ZFS system. So that was something I spoke about on that Brian Moses show. And actually, he was speaking about it, mainly about using FreeNAS and stuff. And I looked into that, and I was having some issues actually installing FreeNAS. And I thought that was a blessing in disguise because I thought, actually, you know what? I'm going to just learn from the off. So I put up in an Ubuntu OS, loaded up the latest, can't remember what it is, an LTS version of it, and installed ZFS and set up my own pool and everything like that. So I'm now running a ZFS RAID Z2, which means I've got 2 lots of redundancy. It's a RAID 6 setup, essentially, and it's a lot of fun. It's been interesting the last couple of weeks because of the heat. I'll talk about that later on, about the monitoring and stuff. So I've been making sure to keep the hard drives cool and stuff, and balancing that between actually how loud it is. But it's surprisingly not too loud. I mean, it's actually running in the background now, and it's not being too bad. One interesting thing, actually, before I do kind of go on, is I've actually opted. So I got 6 hard drives, and I've used up all my SATA ports of my motherboard, and I decided to not use a dedicated hard drive for actually the operating system. So I actually just ended up taking something out of Brian Moses' book and using a USB drive. So USB 3 drive, small little 32 gig little dongle thing, USB pen, and installed Ubuntu on that. And now I've just been backing that up to make sure, because I know that's going to die sooner than, maybe the hard drives will die and stuff, and I want to make sure that's okay. So I've been making images of that. So that's been interesting. And the other thing actually, is burn-in testing. So that was something I've never done before. The idea of using Mensa and all these things and memtest to make sure that your hardware, when you build it, your hardware is up to scratch. So I had a lot of fun the first couple of days, literally just ragging this system, for hours on end, kind of keeping up, making sure the heating and everything was right on the CPU, to make sure that, the paste I put on correctly and how it was, and distributing the heat and everything. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
You might as well have done the whole last segment in French for my benefit, because, it's arguable that I know anything about software, but hardware is just a whole...
I think you should give it a go. I think you should build a Hackintosh, personally.
I'd love to. I actually would love to. I would like to give it a go, but I'd be lying if I said I knew much about it at all, to be honest. But it sounds like that was really good fun doing what you did, to be fair.
Do you know what, man? It was blast from the past, kind of when I used to do PC builds and stuff, and it was I was rusty, and it was really interesting, kind of speccing out a machine for once, bit by bit, as opposed to the Mac Apple approach, which is kind of you take what you can and you take what you're given, really, for the price that you pay. So although I love Mac and I love Apple, I also do love the fact of being able to the value and being able to pick in each individual bit.
Yeah, absolutely. What were the pitfalls though? What could have gone wrong?
Everything. Well, I could have fried the CPU when I put it in and stuff. So you have to use shock, anti-static, straps and stuff when you're actually setting up your build and actually playing around with this hardware, because you don't want to get any static hitting each of the components, specifically the CPU. Putting that in is always the interesting one, because you have your motherboard out, and then you take, you then essentially take this tiny, that costs the most out of everything, essentially, is this Intel i5 thing. It's a tiny little thing, comes in a crappy box. And then you take it out and you put it in, and then you have to put this horrible paste stuff on it. So you look like your mate, because that then distributes the heat better. You put this horrible paste stuff on it, which you think, I'm ruining this beautiful CPU here. And then you literally have to squish this fan on, because I got the K version, the unlocked version. It didn't come with a stock fan, but actually it's kind of a blessing in disguise there as well, because I ended up paying, I think it was £25 for this Cooler Master fan that everyone raves about. And it's huge and scary, because you're essentially squishing this thing on your CPU. But it is absolutely amazing. It's it's a massive fan, but it distributes the heat so well, and it really does show.
So what's the paste do? Is that like an adhesive thing, or that's something protective? Or
all it is, I don't know what it is. It's like some compound thing that you put over the CPU, so it distributes the heat. So the idea is it goes, and when you squish it down, it provides a nice seal, so that the heat transfers from the CPU up to this cooler, this cooling fan, as quick as possible and as effective as possible.
Gotcha. Okay. And what's the difference in price between an i5 and an i7?
This is the interesting thing. So the new 7th gens was out, which was good timing for me, really. The price bump would have been about another £100, I reckon. And I didn't really need the power. If you're using i7s and stuff, typically for, if you want really fast single cores because you're using gaming and stuff. And I wasn't. So the other idea I was going to go with was actually to use secondhand hardware. And I kind of chickened out there. I chickened out because I wanted, the first thing I thought of when I was making a server was I want to use a Xeon processors, and I want to use ECC RAM, and, I want it to be proper hardware grade stuff, and server grade stuff. And then I realized that's a lot of money. And do I really need it? No. And am I going to have as much fun, as much value out of it? Kind of, when I limit it to the budget that I wanted to pay and what I needed. Yeah, and it turns out, it's fine the way I've done it. Chickened out of using secondhand hardware, really, partly because I just wanted to spec it out myself. I like the idea of being able to spec it out on Amazon and stuff, and seeing and playing around with it. And it's been really fun.
No, it sounds awesome. It really does. Cool. So what else you got on the list for us?
So other things on the list, so they do kind of relate, actually. So one of the things that I had to do was do a transfer. So I did a transfer from my old server to my new server. And there's a lot of media on there, a lot of photos and things like that. And they're all backed up to Dropbox, but they also need to be copied across. And one of the things that's the beautiful thing about ZFS, and I definitely want to get someone on to talk about ZFS in a very far more technical manner that I can. But essentially, it's like Git, really, kind of the way that is hashed. Everything's hash upon a hash upon a hash. And actually, when you talk, in the future, in a later bit, when you may talk about a certain Bitcoin thing and stuff, you'll realize with blockchains, and it's this idea, that you've got this consistency because that the hash is the same. is the same file. And actually everything's checksummed, and there's this idea of scrubbing, and essentially what happens is it stops bit rot happening. So ZFS, you do this scrub every week or every month, however you want to do it. And what it does is it essentially goes through every file and checks to make sure that that file that you have on disk hashes to the same, or that block hashes to the same that it actually is meant to be, like what was written. If it's not, it can then use one of the redundant bits to actually pick that up. That was one of the things actually with the scrub, which was the thing where people were going on about ECC RAM and how you should use that because potentially you can corrupt your whole ZFS-pool. I found a really interesting YouTube video which I'll try and put in the show notes, which kind of went against that and said like there's a lot of things that have to go wrong for it to be like that. But yeah, so one of the things was it's the whole concept of hashing, and I just thought, well, when I'm copying this stuff across, so I synced it all across, and actually I used a bit of rsync and I used a bit of just USB 3 kind of plugging in an external hard drive, and I wanted to make sure that those files were exactly the same as what was already on that on my old Drobo. So I ended up using something called Hashdeep, and essentially what it does is it goes through a whole file system, a whole directory, or and it will just do the hashes. It will just get the SHA-1s or the MD5 hashes of each one of those files, and then when I do the copy over, I'll just run those on that and say, are they the same hash? And it was really interesting and really cool, like to be able to know for a fact that the stuff I'd copied over was the exact same. And that's the beauty of that good a hashing function is you get this however long string essentially, or 128 bits or whatever, telling you that file is the same as that file, and if it's a little bit out, 1 bit out maybe, it's going to change that hash and it's wrong. So fortunately I didn't have any problems there, and it all kind of transferred over nicely.
Very nice.
Yeah, and then finally, and then I'll let you talk because I know I'm yabbing on about all the server stuff, is monitoring. So at work and everything, we use things like Datadog, and we use things like Loggly and PagerDuty, and it's a great setup, but I was thinking, can I do that on a budget? Can I just do it for my own server? All I want to do is things like, temperatures and stuff. I want to make sure that the hard drives are spinning all right, they're using things like the smart on each of the hard drives to be able to read like how hot they're getting, using the sensors on the CPU to make sure of that. Make sure to keep up to date with like, Z-pool, how healthy is my ZFS-pool, when was the last scrub and things like that. And also are these processes running, such as how good is Plex doing, how good is SSH doing. I looked around and one of the things actually that popped up was something called Monit, and I'd never heard of it before. And it kind of, I felt like it could be it could be a brilliant thing for our work as well. But it turned out it has got some limitations. But the beautiful thing about it is you code all the monitors and stuff in plain text files, and you use it in their own little DSL, and it allows you to use for sensors and stuff, essentially like kind of monitoring aspects. You're able to just create little shell scripts, and it will run those. And if it the return value, the exit code on it, or whatever the value in the certain files that you generate are, it will then do certain actions. Like in my case, I actually got it to use send out emails initially, and that was great. But then I wanted to actually use things like, I love the idea about to get push notifications. I want to know, is my server running too hot? Okay, maybe I need to look into it, and I use push notifications. Now, setting that up can be a bit of a ball ache because you may have to pay, and all this. And so I found out something called pushover. And pushover is like just for £5 you get a license, just a single device license, and it's just a developer's dream. Like all it is you can just do a curl request to an endpoint and just say, look, by the way, just dump this, and it will just send it to your device. And now I get push notifications. So I've got for monitoring, I've got push notifications instantaneously if things are going wrong. Yeah. And it's been great.
Yeah, okay, I have to check that out. That does sound quite good. Yeah.
It's, you know what, man, I would definitely recommend it because there was this balance. Like I was just thinking maybe I could just use shell scripts for everything. Like I noticed a ZFS health status thing, and it was just using a simple script that was on a cron job.
Yeah.
And I kind of went away from that to use Monit because I thought Monit kind of had a bit more, some nicer features, and it was a bit more complete with other things like checking out processes and checking out kind of like how the CPU usage and performance is doing and stuff. But this combined like with all the using shell scripts, and everything's a shell script in Monit. I would actually recommend looking into Monit and Pushover, because Pushover is great just for the fact of you get, I think it's like 7,000 push notifications a month with this £5 that you pay one off.
Okay.
And I remember it back in the day when I did some freelance stuff and I used it a bit, but this is just great. And it's just nice to be able to know. And again, it's like, why do I need to know? Just because I want to, like, does it really matter about your home server? It's like, to me, it does. Being a nerd.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Awesome. But how about you though, sir? That's enough of me ranting.
Yeah. I guess I can say, I I definitely needed some time away from programming, certainly in the evenings and stuff. So away from that, I've been I built a summer house. Well, I had a flat pack summer house anyway to put that together, and I sort of got electricity.
That is no easy feat, sir. I've got to say that is no easy feat, and you've done a darn good job looking at the pictures.
Well, it's not that great, but yeah, I mean,
ever the one to congratulate himself, Mickey B.
Well, I got that done. I got an electrician in to power it up, and I've got a network cable running. That was a bit of a nightmare because I didn't really know what I was doing, but finally got internet in there, which was great. And I've been putting up plasterboard. So, but do you know what? I've enjoyed doing that so much. I've insulated it as well, and I think just having a hobby away from programming has been healthy for a little bit, to be honest with you. So that's been really good fun. But back to the programming kind of stuff. What have I been working on? So I guess I think I've spoken quite openly about it in the past, but the testing on the JavaScript side of things for my code base is nowhere near the kind of level that I've got on the back end. So, and still isn't. But what I have been doing more is kind of following up those errors in Sentry. So before, I literally only had my PHP errors going through to Sentry. So I kind of opened up Pandora's box and made it so my JavaScript was going through as well, which was eye-opening, but really useful. But one of the things I suddenly realised was that my production version of the JavaScript, which obviously did all the minimizing, compressing, and tree shaking, all the rest. So then when I was reading those errors, it was just, all the horrible variable names that made no sense to me, and you couldn't read it. So what I didn't realize actually was it was just one line of code changed to my Webpack config file to produce the map file. So that's been really good actually, and I was able to, whilst there wasn't hundreds of bugs, it was just nice to go through them, and I really like my Sentry error page to be empty. So it's nice to be on top of that and to be able to manage it. So that's one of the things I've been doing. Obviously, you're aware, but for everyone listening who doesn't know, I had that horrible incident in the week with Supervisor and the queue that I've got in place. So that wasn't fun. But what I didn't realise was I've got one task now that's placed onto a queue, and something was wrong with the code. So I was desperately trying to fix it, making all these kind of changes in my code. And what I didn't realise was that code, that process that's put in the queue, the code is cached. So I was literally putting exit statements in there saying why is nothing happening? After banging my head for about an hour, and you'll kill me because it was the kind of thing where I should have read the documentation properly. It was you need to restart Supervisor whenever you make a change to that code, that particular process. So that was particularly painful, but the short-term pain is, definitely been outweighed by the gain, because what it has meant is obviously anyone who's got our track code installed, it means that the time now, I literally am just collecting that data when it first comes in and then passing it onto the queue, which means that the loading time for our subscribers now is dramatically reduced. I mean, before it was around about 3 seconds. And I knew about it, and I was embarrassed about it, and it was just one of those things I needed to get around to doing. So now it's it's about 300 milliseconds. So I still like to get it down. I mean, looking at things like Hotjar, I think they're 90 milliseconds. But, obviously you have to take into consideration a little bit the kind of resources they have. I don't know. I think 300 milliseconds is okay.
I think, hey, dude, from 3 seconds to 300 milliseconds,
it's a good
take that win, don't you?
With. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I had that fun. And I guess going back to the previous point I was making about logging the JavaScript errors to Sentry, one of the things that I've kind of been obviously doing to fix those issues is a lot of defensive programming. And I don't know if it's just a perception that I've got, but I definitely feel like I do a lot more defensive programming in JavaScript than I do in PHP. And I don't know if that's a language thing or just that I'm a really bad JavaScript programmer. I mean, do you find that, or would you say the balance is equal?
You know what, man, right? I definitely don't think it's because you're a bad programmer. I think it's the whole...
Liar.
I think it's, the idea that, it's the client, isn't it? So it's going down to the client, and you don't have control over who runs that code. On a server backend, you kind of have a bit more control over it. Now, you have to make sure that things that are coming in are, sanitized and stuff like that. But I can understand why you do more defensive programming on the JavaScript side. When you say defensive programming, then what kind of things do you mean?
Do you know what? It's just the basics. In reality, I don't know why, but I seem to do a lot of bad practice that I don't do in PHP. So, for example, referencing an object in an array and just assuming that key exists. Because at some point, I started off with that key definitely existed, but obviously over time that array can change, or might end up becoming null or whatever. Things like that, just really basic stuff. But I think, like you say, because it's happening on the client side, they're things that I hadn't necessarily picked up on before I was logging them. So I think, to be honest with you, a lot of it is I am doing more bad practice in the JavaScript side of things than I am PHP. I can't put a finger, on why that is, but I don't know. Strange.
Actually thinking about it, when I start thinking about it more now, so you are kind of trained in the JavaScript world to be a lot more defensive. You don't know where it's going to be run in the environment. So what people do, it's like things like polyfills and stuff. They always check if something's present. If something's not, then you may have to load a polyfill, or you may have to do something different. So you're doing a lot of this kind of like you're doing there, that checking, that sniffing.
Yeah.
Things such as like it's the whole concept of undefined can be set. So you'd seeing like typical, if you look through the jQuery code back in the day, that the way they would do it is you'd pass in a self-invoking function and you'd make your own undefined that you'd use in that, and the this and the window, and people can change all these things. So you do think more about what's happening because you've realised that a lot more can change because of the fact that outside of that code, especially in your world actually, where I would say you'd have to be ultra defensive because you're putting code on other people's sites that you don't even know what they've got on that site.
Yeah.
So you're completely outside. So, I think if you speak to a lot of people maybe who use these third-party APIs and provide this JavaScript, they are too probably very defensive of what they do and making sure that things are set and things aren't, things are what they want to be because people can change it.
But also, conversely, it almost feels like sometimes when I'm doing this defensive program and I'm going and fixing these errors saying, oh, okay, it almost feels like a bit of a hack because it feels like, well, you're fixing the symptom. No, the other way around, right? You're fixing the problem without actually knowing what actually caused it. And so it's like, well, shouldn't you be going like further upstream and finding out what's happened to get to that point in the first place rather than dealing with the result of it? I mean, I guess the argument is you should be dealing with both, right? But I don't know. Whenever I'm doing JavaScript, I always feel like I'm doing things in a very hacky way, and I don't know how I'll ever get away from that. I mean, I'm reading the ES6 book at the moment, as you know, and that's a brilliant book. It's really, really good. But even though I know, reading the really good examples of how to code, I still end up doing it in quite a hacky way. It's not as if I don't know the right way to do it. It's just very strange. I don't know. Probably just me.
No, I think it's interesting. I think with JavaScript, it depends also if you're pre-compiling it and stuff like that, because you can use all the latest and greatest from ES6 if you know that you're getting Babel and it's transpiling it down for you into, in quotes, ugly code or more, whatever needs to be done for it to run on the most platforms.
Yeah.
But if you aren't and you're using just native vanilla JavaScript, which probably you end up having to do because, again, this code that you may be generating and creating, it goes on many sites, so you want to have every fine-grained know exactly what bit and byte's going down. You can't use transpilers and stuff maybe because you don't trust them enough. Maybe you should, I don't know, but I wouldn't. I'd be like you, where I'd want to know exactly what's going down the wire if it's going on a third-party site, because that's the only sensor I have is to be able to grab as much information then and give it back to me. Once it's on my server, I can do whatever I like, and that's why I applaud you for doing what you've done, where you've split out the processing and the collection, because collection and processing are two different problems, and you've reaped the reward there of collection actually can be a very quick task. It can be, grab the stuff, dump it in my database or dump it in a queue, and then I'll deal with it later. I'll deal with it in another transaction, another problem, and then, yep, okay, fine. Now I can process it in many different ways or however I want, and I don't have to worry about it, people not being collected and stuff because of delays and stuff, because that's happening in the background in another problem.
Yeah. So the other thing really, so like I say, I guess it's a little bit obsessive, but so I've got my Sentry error page pretty much blank now, which is great, and I'm not seeing many errors come in, which is fantastic. So really, that's allowed me to take a little bit of a step back and look at some of the other aspects of the application that I'm constantly working on. And I think the main issue I've got at the moment is now down to like speed issues. And it's a really tricky one because anything I do now to try and counteract that, I think, is not going to be a small job. And I've been looking at things like flat tables, but I don't think they're necessarily going to help me because a lot of the nature of the speed issues is that people are constantly querying on different date ranges, and as part of that, there's lots of counts. I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to try it. I think that's the first thing to do is to try with flat tables, but essentially it's really difficult. And a part of me thinks, well, look, are these queries always going to be slow? Is there, certain things that, what you can do a certain amount, but eventually you are going to take quite a long time to retrieve that data.
What you want, the ideal is information comes in and it's instantly available for someone to query in like a SQL kind of form and be able to do date ranges and everything and get counts and stuff. But then you reach a size that gets, you start bringing all this data in. It gets quite hard to do that, specifically for everyone. And then there's a couple of okay, so you've got that. That's the problem. Like, what do you do? Well, you either kind of expand out and you say, no, right, we've got to have bigger databases and maybe we're going to shard it. Maybe we're going to, do all these crazy things to make it so they can still do what they want to do. These queries anywhere and everywhere. Or you kind of take a step back and then you think, okay, what do I want them to do? Like, you do the whole ETL model, which is the extract, transform, load thing. And it's like, so what you'd do is you'd have your collection phase, and then maybe it would take an hour or two for it to go into, them seeing it. But then maybe that's not what they want. Or maybe there's certain aspects that they can see real time, and then there's other aspects they can't. And then you get things like aggregations and counts and stuff that happen in the background. It is, I suppose, the idea maybe is that you have this concept of, if people have saved queries, what's wrong there may be, caching those queries or preempting those queries because you say, okay, this is the type of query they want, a weekly stats report. Or if they're very fine-grained, though, they need to understand that that's going to take a long time. Or it's a tough one you're in, actually, because you're trying to give them everything, but I don't know if you can. I think it's going to be one of those things where it's going to, aggregation or smaller data sets, maybe, as you say, like denormalizing the tables and stuff, but then that's catering towards certain query loads. I think that's one thing I've realized with SQL, is that, and relational databases and databases in general, is they can do everything. Like a relational database, you can do everything, but, to get performance and stuff, you need to denormalize it, but you need to know what you're trying to optimize for on the off. Like, you don't know what indexes you need because certain queries are going to need certain indexes and stuff. And maybe having multiple, you can't, it's not the client giving that client that ability. You are kind of making it a problem for yourself to be like, oh crap, how am I going to try and make it work for everyone?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
So I would say I have no answer to that, sadly.
Well,
other than I would say definitely look into maybe in the domain itself, the business domain, to kind of see what information do they need right there and then, and is there any way of aggregating it? Any way of being able to provide them with this stuff and then provide them with it a bit later on, maybe with more clarity. Get quicker samples and things, and then provide them with more in depth later on, where they're able to do. It goes down the funnel. But I understand probably what they're looking for is, I want to know now exactly what happened this hour, but it's what they need to know that hour. That's the interesting part.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But other than that, I mean, I know we talked about this last podcast that me and you did together. We did talk about it, so I don't want to rant on about it again too much because I don't want to repeat ourselves, but it did really make me cringe this week. I heard it again. I don't think he used this exact phrase last podcast, but I think it was Amber Rudd or Theresa May said, oh yeah, we need weaker encryption. And I've heard that phrase quite a few times this week. Obviously, with everything that's happened in Manchester and London in this country, it has been again in the news a lot. We need weaker encryption. We need WhatsApp. We need Facebook to weaken their encryption. And to me, weak encryption is not encryption. That's more like obfuscation, right?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's not encryption if someone can just easily break it. Essentially, what you're trying to say is, I want a backdoor in. But then who's to say the bad guys aren't going to use that? You see, this is the thing. And I think this is where, we spoke to Colin Hardy last episode talking about like the shadow brokers. Like the NSA had all these hacks and stuff, and then they got hacked. Yeah. And now what the problem is that they've been, this is why we had WannaCry was such a big issue, because of the fact that the SMB Samba exploit helped it trickle down. So who's to say that isn't going to happen with this type of thing?
Yeah.
It's a tough one. It's a very, very tough one.
Yeah. So anyway, I can see you've got some more things anyway. I don't want
to... well, yeah. So kind of the only other things actually I've got is mainly kind of what I've been doing at work. So I've been doing a lot of upgrades recently, actually. We've taken the task now to upgrade from, so we're currently on 5.6, on PHP 5.6. We want to upgrade to 7.1. It's time we do that. There's been a couple of bits that kind of have stopped us from doing that, mainly just kind of how our server setup is, but we've slowly been chinking away at them, which has been great. One of them, the first one I did, was getting a code base up to scratch, actually. So that was one of the easy ones, actually, it turned out. So our code base was very good at moving from 5.6 to 7.1. So another thing actually was our mail server needed to be moved, and we host our own mail, which is our local business mail. And it was really interesting because I've never dealt with email. Kind of, the whole idea for me, email was always like, oh yeah, chuck it over to Gmail to deal with, use Google. But dealing with email was really interesting and really fun. And actually, like I was even exploring like telnetting in and sending email that way. How old school is that? And it was really, really fun. But one of the things we did here was to move the mail server, and we moved it out to AWS. And it has been, we slowly started to move more stuff to AWS. And this is a whole other debate, really, of, like using a platform like AWS. We've moved it over to AWS with its own, it's got its own EBS, backups and snapshots. And so interesting because they provide like a nice simple Lambda function a Python function that allows it to do auto snapshots and things like that. But like the EC2 instances, looking at all the different things there, I mean, it's a different world, man. It's like going into it, you realize that this platform is just a different world in itself. The concept of like all the different setups you can have, like T setups, so where you have more burst rate and stuff with CPUs, to more compute intensive setups and stuff, and choosing them. Yeah, it's very interesting, and I'll put some things in the show notes about what we've been doing there. But yeah, finally we did upgrade from Puppet 3 to 4, which has been great. And now we're also updating from Debbie and Wheezy Jessie to Stretch, which isn't fully out yet, but we thought we'd take the leap to go to Stretch immediately. And we're now running, our mail server's running Stretch, which was great. And we're slowly moving over our dev server to Stretch, and then it will leak down, trickle down to the live stuff, which is great. So it's been a really good time. Upgrades are always scary because what have they changed? Oh no, how are we going to fix it and stuff? But to get to the end goal, which is what we want really, is Stretch with 7.1 and Puppet 4. It'll be great. And some upgrades you just have to do, like when things are end of life, like Puppet 3's end of life, and we need to be up to 4, and even 5's coming out now. You really have to kind of just think, nope, right, we have to bite the bullet. We have to invest the time now to do that. And although we may not get any foreseeable value out of it from, like, say, a business point of view at this time, we have to keep up with it. You have to change and upgrade because you're not going to get the patches. Like, who's to say there's not a bug, a security hole that occurs similar to, obviously Windows XP was different with WannaCry because they did patch it in the end, but you have to upgrade because you have to remain patched, essentially, and also to get the latest and greatest and take advantage of the platform.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because like you say, sometimes when things are working, you think, well, why do I want to risk breaking it? But like you say, it's short-sighted because you don't know what the issues are down the road. So, yeah, I do fully appreciate that. And I always try and upgrade to the latest versions of things. But yeah, when things go wrong, you kind of feel like, oh, why did I start doing this?
Well, that's exactly it. We talked about it with Webpack, didn't we? Webpack 1 to Webpack 2 with Fraser last time. And other things such as like Symphony is an interesting one with us. So the beautiful thing about Symphony, Symphony Flex has come out. Like they're talking about that. Fabian's talking about that, which is really interesting. And Symphony 4 and like kind of the roadmap for that. And we're still on 2.8, and we need to move. Well, actually, sorry, correction. We're on 3.3. We're actually on 3.3 now for a new project we're doing, because new projects, you get the latest and greatest, and it's bringing the other projects in line with it. And we've got all our APIs and stuff on 3, but our marketplace is actually on 2.8 still. We've done all the changes. So the beautiful thing about how Symphony have done it is that they've essentially slowly over the time of that 2 release, of that 2 dot release, they've added in the features that that are going to make 3. And essentially any deprecations they do eventually go to 3.0 or whatever it is now. But you can essentially build up to it. So, we're now on 2.8 with no deprecations, which means then we can just switch to 3 without any worry. And it seems like they're doing the same thing they will with the 3 branch. So it's I think that's one of the values in Symphony, and I think it goes kind of gets taken for granted. Like the upgrade paths in Symphony are so good for the business world, where it's this structured upgrade paths. Like, people complain about like the world, that the kind of the JavaScript world and stuff. It's, they broke it again, they're changing it again and stuff. And, that really does hinder people adopting technologies and stuff, because sometimes you do need stable upgrade paths and thought about how is someone going to upgrade. Because like you say, we all want the latest and greatest, but you also feel like it's not broken, don't fix it. But you want a state, if you can give them a stable upgrade path that tells them how and why to fix that, maybe some investment into upgrading it, at least more people are going to do it than, no, I'm not going to bother because it's just, breaking it, and you're going to have old stagnant code that isn't maintained anymore.
So I've got a horrible issue like that, and you're going to cringe when I tell you. But so I've got one code base where a React code base, and it's all the old kind of React.create class, where you create your classes that way rather than using the native JavaScript classes. And obviously I've started doing it the right way now, but I've still got a load of them where they're not. And so now my console got a really annoying red message that's saying, this is not supported anymore. You need to use native classes. And it's so annoying. Like, do I now go through and change them all? Or I've now got a horrible hybrid of code. And I
you've just got a normal code base. I wouldn't this is the thing. Like, you've got a genuinely normal code base which has gone through some transitions.
Yeah.
And general business, code bases, successful code bases go through transitions. And I think it's working out a plan for that. So I would say, yeah, it probably is valuable to go spend some time, maybe an hour or two, to slowly chink away at these things.
Yeah.
Like when you've got some time and, this seems like kind of medial work in the grand sense of things. It's not a massive structural thing. It's more a syntax thing. Maybe you can get some fancy regexes that do it or something. I don't know. But, maybe it's an automated path to do it. But even if it is just a case of you going in, you're doing something good there because you're slowly built, again, where's the value? Like, I'm still creating a class. But unfortunately, this is something that's changed and you kind of have to go with it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's the right attitude to have anyway.
No, it's a tough one though, man, because it is like, that it's, I think we all want to make features. We all want to make new, cool, shiz really. And saying, I've got to upgrade something. It's like, well, why? It's working. It's like, it's like, well, no, but then this doesn't work. And we're taking, and you do kind of think,
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was going to say I have one last thing to talk about, if that's all right, because I'm conscious we're running out of time.
Go for it, man.
But, so Ethereum wallet. Ethereum?
Ethereum.
Okay. So,
Ethereum, yes.
Yeah. Obviously, it wouldn't be a good podcast if I didn't talk about something that I don't understand, right? So here is that time. So basically, I've got a friend who has lost his password, and he's only got like £10 worth of currency in there or something. But he's basically asked me if I could somehow brute force his password. So I did a little bit of research and found out, because I know nothing about these technologies. I always say to my friend, it's over my head, and he says, no, it's at the side of your head. You just don't know it yet. And but anyway, so I've done some research, and I understand the password is stored locally on your machine, which is part of the appeal of it, I guess. And I understand that it's encrypted with AES 256. And I also know there's a tool out there written in Python, which will help you do a brute force attack on your own password, providing that you have some idea of some of the words that we used. So I did try this tool, and I can't remember exactly why, but I suddenly realised, it wasn't quite working for me the way I wanted. So now I started trying to script something up in PHP. But I don't know. I mean, is it simply an encrypted string using AES 256, or is there other stuff going on that's going to make my attempts completely useless? And my Python isn't good enough to read that script and fully understand exactly what's going on.
So I didn't get the first bit because the internet cut out. But it is essentially what he's trying to do is he's lost his private key to access his Ethereum wallet.
Correct.
Right. Unfortunately, he will not get it back. It's nigh on impossible. Many people, actually not many people, but there's been some high-profile cases in the Bitcoin world where people have lost their private key, and they will never get it back. And that money can be seen in the lovely ledger, but you'll never be able to use it.
Wow.
Unfortunately, that's the case. So the way it works is kind of like you said. There's a password. You've got your own password. You can unlock it essentially and use it. It uses public private key encryption.
Yeah.
Which is used. RSA. It's used. For all of our stuff, as SSL and things like that.
Yeah.
You can't lose that private key. If you lose that private key, you can't actually access anything. So there are things like I think you can make your private key out of passphrase or something, like different words. So maybe I don't know if he's got the dictionary words or something, and maybe that's what this Python script is just a brute force attack of what he's trying to do.
Exactly that.
Doubt that's going to work. because unless he knows any kind of what words they were, like maybe some help, I can give you at least 2 of these words, like let's work out the others. There's going to be a lot of possibilities because I think it's like 6 or 7 words maybe combined for this.
Yeah.
I think that's how Ethereum works. I've been doing quite a bit. It was interesting when you put this in the show notes because I've been very interested in like Bitcoin and kind of the underlying technology, which is blockchains.
Yes.
Partly because of the fact that this whole idea of hashing and things like that, and it's absolutely fascinating. Definitely have to get people on the show for it. But the short answer for that question though is sadly I don't think it's going to be possible. You have to back that up and look after that private key, and that's part of the thing you get with Bitcoin. You get Bitcoin, which is this idea if you don't have any banks, you don't have any government say or anything, you can do what you want, you can transfer money around and everything, and it's just the brilliant thing about blockchains is the fact you've got this distributed, everyone's kind of got the the truth, the source of truth, and it's distributed truth, which is just a crazy idea to think of, but it works with the idea of proof of work, kind of working out how the transactions and stuff are put into blocks and things and everything. But yeah, the one thing you don't get is the idea of I've lost my password, can I have a forgotten password please, because there's no central resource.
Yeah.
So you no one you can ask. And there actually has been a lot. There's been one high profile actually, I'll put it in the show notes, a case where someone did lose their Bitcoin private key, and they had a lot of money in Bitcoin. And the sad thing is that Bitcoin actually is gone from the world now. No one can take it out. No one can use it. No one can reclaim it. And that's what it is.
Well, I mean,
is that what you wanted to hear then?
Well, this guy has got a lot of the words that he thinks are in there. And
well, that's good. I mean, if he's got the words that he thinks are in there, then you can at least then kind of just do swaps, permutations on that.
Yeah.
And then maybe dictionary, but it's going to be hard though, dude.
Well, that's why I was trying to. I mean, this Python script, I was trying to work out whether it would work in parallel. And from what I read, it will. And then I was looking at Amazon. They've got, is it called HPC or something? Like they do offer like supercomputing power.
Yeah, you could spin up like a really high compute instance on AWS, which would be pretty fun.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but it's trying to find the time to do it.
Seems like quite a fun little project, though. Well, it actually seems like quite a fun little project to try and, find this private key if you can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what appealed to me, and I was like, well, I don't know anything about it, so I'll read a little bit more and find out. But, I mean, like you say, the pure fact of the number of possibilities, trying to work out what that...
Like, this is the beauty of private public key, and it's all about prime numbers and all this crazy stuff. It's nigh on impossible to break, but if you do have a starting point, at least most of it, maybe then it'll be easier because you're kind of dividing down how hard that problem is.
But even things like case sensitivity or that kind of jazz,
I don't know actually if the dictionary words do that. Actually, I'm not sure. I only heard about the dictionary stuff just on a previous podcast that I did, so that's why I know about that.
Okay. Well, that doesn't sound too hopeful.
No, sorry,
hopeful. Sorry.
Yeah, I will give you some, kind of thing. The blockchain is awesome, so that's something definitely to read into. If you're kind of going down the Ethereum route, and the Bitcoin route, check out what blockchains are. And there was
Nick McDowell, a friend of mine. He's very much into blockchaining. He's very interested.
Well, we need to get him on the show then, because I'd love to talk about them.
Maybe you ask him. Maybe he'll say yes.
I'll try. Oh, do you know what? I'm going to ask him and see. Let's see if he'll come on the show. I'll beg him. But no, it'd be really cool.
About blockchaining, he might.
Yeah, well, that'd be really, really cool because it is such an interesting technology and a concept that just blows my mind.
Cool. All right. Is that a good place to wrap it up, or?
I think it is. I've got two more slight little things. So first thing is PHP. So with my changing from PHP 5.6 to 7.1, working out differences in code and stuff. So working out date time changes and stuff. There was actually an interesting thing in, I think it was a dot release of 7 where the microseconds had gone. There was a bug that happened in, I think it was 3 or something, 0.3, where the microseconds just didn't appear. It was actually a bug in PHP when they released it, and then it came back in 0.4. So one of the things I use is a thing called eval.org, and that's spelt in leet speak, because it's actually all these PHP instances and HVM instances, and it spins them all up, and it will do all your scripts for you. So you run a bit of script, and it will tell you the outputs for all the different ones and how they differ. So if there is any changes, so it's a great way of seeing how code runs in different platforms or different versions.
Yeah.
And the other thing is ASCII Cinema. So one thing I have done in the past, especially like with kind of like, you know, walkthroughs and stuff, kind of at work, kind of just to show pull requests off and how things work maybe in the command line a bit, is something called ASCII Cinema. And actually I used it in a blog post that I recently did, which was how we use Homebrew to manage our project development scripts. It's a great little tool, and all it does is it essentially just records what you do in your command line. So, you know, instead of having to spin up like screen, you know, kind of sharing kind of thing and recording it and all that stuff, you just run this and it will then dump it, and it will then produce a beautiful like ASCII kind of player, which allows you to scroll, you know, back and forth, seek and everything, and put it on your, you know, put it in blog post, put it, you know, share it. So definitely recommend that. And that is me. And I am burnt out now with all the stuff that I've just said because I've been talking way too much.
No worries. Well, thanks for everything you brought to the show. It's good.
Well, and you too, sir. You too.
Yeah.
It's been fun. It's been good to catch up. We'd have to do this more frequently again. It's hard though. Life gets busy.
Yes, it does.
Now you're saying you've been busy, you know, doing your shed and stuff. I've realised the fun of that. Like I've destroyed a shed this weekend, and then I've been doing some concrete. Oh my days! Like concrete.
What,
you know, people
concrete?
who.
Or destroy?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
No, about both. A combination of two. So I had a bit of concrete that I did slab that I didn't want, so I broke that up. So we've been expanding out. We're getting a new shed. So we destroyed the old shed. We got the base, and then we need to expand the base a little bit. So we started off with a decent base as it was, and then so it was digging out some grass out of that, you know, making sure that's all right, and then it was the idea of laying concrete.
Yeah.
And it's just a lot of fun, a lot of hard work. You respect people who do it, and it's hard to get it level and everything, but it is rewarding. Like I can understand where you're coming from at the beginning of the show when you said where, you know, like doing that type of stuff is rewarding and it gives you a different fuzzy feeling.
Yes, fuzzy feeling. It does. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Oh, sorry. One last one. Again, not watched this at all. Might be awful, but I did find some when I was digging around for some sort of like information on Postgres stuff. I found some conference videos, and I think they're from this year, so they're nice, new and relevant. And it's the Go-To conference. It was in Chicago this year, and it looked like some, you know, really good speakers and stuff. So it'll be well worth a watch, I reckon. Could be awful, but
no, Bud, your picks always
deliver, you know, right?
Always deliver. You are the postman. You always deliver.
I like that, my new nickname. So I've put a link in the notes anyway for you.
Awesome. No, that's great, man. And it's been good talking, good catching up. And audience, I think I'm safe to say it's been a great episode.
The best ever.
The best. We're so good.
Yes.
No, I'm joking. That's really big-headed. Sorry.
But we are, yeah.
We're okay. We try our best.
Yeah.
When I listen back to this, I'm going to hate it, but that's just typical when you hear your own voice. Anyway, Mickey B, I'll speak to you soon then, dude.
Yeah. Cheers.
All right, audience. Bye.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamaybe.com or follow us on Twitter at 3 Devs and a Maybe.